In 1932, a poor South Carolinian mill worker named Willie Lee Buffington teamed up with his childhood friend Uriah Simpkins to create a system of libraries for impoverished blacks in the region of South Carolina and Georgia. Over the course of 30 years, Buffington established over 100 such libraries, coined Faith Cabin Libraries after their preferred construction method, in dozens of cities throughout the region. According to research, 3 of these structures still stand. The first 2, in Seneca and Pendleton, South Carolina, I've already tracked down and documented in earlier work. This time, we're setting out to find the last, and coincidentally, the first, Faith Cabin Library in Saluda, South Carolina. The Seneca cabin is undergoing extensive reconstruction, while the Pendleton one is slowly rotting away. I hope the library in Saluda is in better shape. According to some preliminary research, there is no actual address for the third location. However, it is mentioned that it is at the crossroads of Old Chapel Ferry Road and Highway 178. My name is Joel Daniel Wynn, and I will be performing this little expedition. And recording me on this outing is my wife, Tiffany Wynn. Our journey begins in Seneca, a tiny town nestled in amongst several small rivers and lakes in the northern part of South Carolina. I've only lived in the city for a handful of years, but the surrounding locales are the place of my birth, and the region is a beauty to behold. Resting in the Piedmont, or foothills, of the Appalachian Mountains, the countryside is covered in forests and meadows, dotted here and there with clusters of civilization. Lakes dot the hilly forests and provide opportunity for sport and relaxation for the locals. Old, collapsing structures of earlier eras are sprinkled among the towns, and ramshackle barns or ancient outhouses are a common sight. It is this fact that first drove me to research the Faith Cabin Libraries. Who knows how many other fascinating bits of history are slowly rotting away in these idyllic vales. We're coming up on Pendleton. Pendleton is where one of the other 2 Faith Cabin Libraries still is. It is up here down this little no-name road. This is the typical view from much of the northern part of our trip. Vast, verdant forests bulge over the limits set for them by road construction crews, and small tracts of cleared, flat land hint at the existence of long-abandoned farms and pastures. To imagine people carving out an existence here without our modern tools and amenities is daunting, but a proud testament to the determination of those who came before us. As the road takes us south, the hills begin to disappear, and the farmland goes from hinted at to omnipresent. There are still significant stands of trees, but divorced from the rocky soil and red clay of my home, the people have obviously pursued farming and animal husbandry well into the current era. Approximately halfway along our journey, we came upon an extraordinarily tiny town by the name of Due West. It appears that almost the entirety of the town has been overtaken by Erskine College, an impressive academic establishment surrounded by miles of trees, creeks, and not much else. Established in 1839, Erskine was formed out of a seminary, and at the time was the first 4-year church-related college in South Carolina. I can feel my professional curiosity tug at me as we pass by buildings that must be a century old at the very least, and I am tempted to pull over and wander about the campus. I wonder what the college was like during the Civil War, and if it played a role in that conflict. The sense of fascinating stories just a window away is almost too much to bear, but I know that our destination is elsewhere, and so we travel on. You never know what happened. You never know what happened in the life of day-to-day individuals a couple of centuries ago in this very area. I mean, 200 years ago would have been the early 1800s. You've likely got settlers, you've likely got people trying to set up homesteads, dealing with Native Americans, from trading to cohabiting to war to everything else. And it's just, there's no real record of a lot of that stuff. And all of the tools and the things that the people use, I mean, it's all wood and, leather, things that just rot and completely fall apart. I mean, like the Civil War, we know where some major battles took place, but there are constant skirmishes during that conflict all over the state. I mean, you don't know who, like, bled and died, you know, just in any given spot of land that is now just a highway or a house or anything else. It's interesting to me. I was forced to wonder how much of our immediate history we've already forgotten. And if we have dismissed with our immediate past so readily, how much worse must the phenomenon be with older knowledge? In our modern era, where information is so readily available, we have forgotten more than we have learned. As we drove down cracked, poorly patched roads past ruined wooden buildings so choked in weeds and vines that they were barely recognizable, I felt a sense of loss that I couldn't quite put into words. I considered the cabins I had already tracked down, and the sad state of repair they were both in. Nothing made those shacks stand out to a person on the street any more than any of the wrecks I had passed on my own journey. It simply wasn't right. Perhaps, with a little luck, this amateur documentary can help shed a little light on an amazing story and interest someone in the history that is fading all around us. Up here, we turn on 378.
We're getting ready to turn on 378, and then
we're looking for
take the next
Chapel
left
Ferry
onto US 378 East.
Something to that effect.
and
This is 378
says
here.
that it's on the corner of.
I mean, it just says, look for it at 378 and Chapel Ferry Road.
Okay.
Continue on US 378 East
This
for
is
1.5 miles.
Yep, this is 378. 1.6 miles, we're going to get to Old Chapel Ferry Road. Theoretically, it should be on the corner, or at least in that general vicinity.
Okay.
So, we shall see, I suppose. Whole bunch of nothing so far.
Whole bunch of just fields.
Yeah. It's sad to me that there's only 3 of these left. He built over 110 of them.
110.
110.
And there's only 3
And there's 3 left.
What's happened? What have happened to all the others?
Knocked down. Bulldozed over. Occasionally, see, the first, he did it for like 30 years. The first several he did were log cabins, but some of the ones in the later years, in like the 50s and stuff, were buildings. So the buildings have just been repurposed, you know. The feeling was about to get worse, though I did not know it at the time. Based on the limited amount of information readily available on the internet, I had narrowed the location of the original Faith Cabin Library to the intersection of 2 streets. But as we turned from one onto the other, we were presented with nothing other than a simple cow pasture. Resplendent bovines notwithstanding, I find myself annoyed and more than a little perplexed. I had hoped for at least an indicator or historical marker, but there was nothing. Since we had found nothing whatsoever at the intersection, I decided we should head into the town of Saluda proper and see if there was anything that might point us in the right direction. Saluda looks like most of the smaller towns in the upstate of South Carolina. The downtown region is dominated by buildings that were built over a century ago, usually of red brick, that have been repurposed by locals who open shops ranging from bookstores to the sale of farm equipment. On the outskirts of the towns, established chain stores are beginning to pop up, slowly drawing people from the mom-and-pop local businesses with mass-produced products sold at a fraction of the cost. It's a relatively new development, and I fear what these towns will look like in a generation. Regardless, I am here for information about the past, not to wring my hands and fret over what may be down the road. With that in mind, I set out to do some digging. What I discovered changed the course of the entire outing.
Alright, so what did you just discover?
Apparently, although this information is not readily available online, the first Faith Cabin Library actually doesn't exist anymore. In fact, even the location where the historical marker was for it is just an empty field at this point. So, The historical marker that originally marked the location of the first Faith Cabin Library was apparently relocated to a local post office for a handful of years, but now isn't even there. According to some local research I did, no one's really even sure where the historical marker ended up at this point. So not only is the building not there, but the historical marker itself has gone missing. There are remnants of a Faith Cabin Library, the second one built in the county, well, ever, but also in the county, about 20 minutes or so from here, 17 miles. So we are going to go see if we can at least get some footage of that, and we will go from there. And so, the search for the last and first Faith Cabin Library ended in defeat. It was gone. There was no record of its destruction, only the remnants of some messages on an online message board suggesting that the marker had resided in a post office for a handful of years but was no longer there. Luckily, while attempting to track the historical marker through the internet, I came across another marker nearby that related to our search. Apparently, part of the second Faith Cabin Library was still standing. Following our curiosity led us to the tiny town of Ridge Spring. Nothing in particular stood out about the town to separate it from the dozens that we had already passed through, but despite its outward plainness, Ridge Spring harbored a secret, squirreled away on its back roads. Now, this was originally a Rosenwald school built in Saluda County in the 1930s. These were a privately funded school project that allowed the black children who were not allowed to go to segregated white schools to have some place to actually learn and attempt to give them a basic education. It is now the Ridge Spring Star Community Center, where people are congregate and serves the community as a whole. The main purpose that we are here today is because most of the Rosenwald schools were also the sites of Faith Cabin Libraries, and this one was no exception. Sadly, over the years, the library itself has completely and utterly collapsed. For the handful of years, there is nothing left except for the stone chimney. So, let's take a look at it. The chimney has obviously been filled with cement and brick a long time ago to make sure that it's not a safety hazard or possible collapse. The original chimney is obviously built with stones, locally gathered rocks put together with a simple mortar. Let's take a look at the marker behind it. Built in 1934, replaced the Ridge Hill Rosenwald School. 6-classroom frame school built in 1923 to 24. The school was funded in part by the Julius Rosenwald Foundation, building more than 500 African American schools in South Carolina, 1917 to 1932. It burned in 1934. Well, there you go. But the new school was built on the same plan at a cost of about $8,000. Grades 1 through 11 attended this school until grade 12 was added in 1947, and it closed in 1957. This building has been the Ridge Spring Star Community Center since 1978. The chimney nearby is all that remains of a Faith Cabin Library, part of a program founded in 1932 by Willie Lee Buffington, 1908 to 1988, to help give small town and rural African Americans better access to books. The library built here in 1934 was the second Faith Cabin Library in the state. More than 100 were built in South Carolina and Georgia from 1932 to 1960. That is all that remains of this one. Sadly, it's more than remains of the first one. More's the pity. A small consolation prize for our trip, but still a pleasure to experience. I suppose my parting words would be to respect your surroundings. You never truly know what transpired where you stand and whose lives were started, shaped, or ended on that small stretch of ground.